Most people set big goals. Wake up early, hit the gym every day, read 30 books a year, stop procrastinating, be more disciplined. And for about 4 days, it works. Then life happens. The motivation fades, the streak breaks, and within 2 weeks, you are exactly where you started. Except now you also feel guilty about it. If this sounds familiar, the problem was never your willpower. It was never your commitment. It was never even your goal. It was your system. James Clear spent years studying the science of habit formation, why some people seem to change effortlessly, while others repeat the same cycles no matter how hard they try. And what he found was surprisingly simple. The people who build lasting habits do not rely on motivation. They do not rely on discipline. They rely on a system so well designed that the right behavior becomes the path of least resistance. His book, Atomic Habits, has sold over 15 million copies worldwide. Warren Buffett calls it one of the most practical books ever written about human behavior, and in this video, we are going to cover the 15 most powerful lessons from this book. Lessons that will completely change how you think about change itself. But before we begin, I will highly recommend you to put your phone a little away from you and just listen. Because there is a quote, when you watch a video, you consume visuals, but when you listen, you visualize the actual meaning of it, and trust me, visualizing is 10 times more powerful than consuming visuals. Lesson 1. Small habits, big results. In 2003, a man named Dave Brailsford took over the British cycling team. At that point, British cyclists had won exactly 1 gold medal in 76 years of Olympic competition. They were, by every measure, a mediocre team. Brailsford did not overhaul everything. He did not bring in radical new training methods or fire the entire coaching staff. Instead, he introduced one idea. He called it the aggregation of marginal gains. Find every single thing that affects a cyclist's performance, no matter how small, and improve it by just 1%. They improved the seats, the tire grip, the hand-washing technique to reduce illness. They even experimented with which pillow helped cyclists sleep better on the road. 5 years later, British cyclists won 60% of the gold medals available at the Beijing Olympics, and then they went on to dominate the London Olympics on home soil. Nothing dramatic changed. Everything changed by a little, and a little, compounded over time, became everything. This is the foundation of Atomic Habits. James Clear's central argument is simple. A 1% improvement every day does not feel like much, but 1% better every day for a year makes you 37 times better by the end of it, and 1% worse every day for a year brings you down to almost nothing. The math is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what this means for how you approach change. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. They set enormous goals, expect dramatic results quickly, and quit when the early progress feels invisible. But progress from small habits is always invisible at first. It accumulates beneath the surface until one day it breaks through all at once. Clear calls this the plateau of latent potential. The habit is working, you just cannot see it yet, and most people quit exactly at the point where the results are closest. The practical shift this lesson asks for is small but fundamental. Stop measuring your habits by the results they produce today. Measure them by the direction they are moving you. Every time you show up, even imperfectly, even briefly, you are casting a vote for the person you are becoming, and those votes accumulate whether you can see them or not. Small is not the consolation prize for people who cannot think big. Small, done consistently, is the only thing that actually works. Lesson 2. Identity first, habits later. 2 people are trying to quit smoking. Someone offers both of them a cigarette. The first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." The second person says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." Same outcome, completely different psychology, and that difference, Clear argues, is everything. Most people approach habits backwards. They start with the outcome they want. Lose 20 pounds, write a book, run a marathon. Then they build behaviors around chasing that outcome. And when motivation dips, which it always does, there is nothing underneath the behavior holding it in place. Clear identifies 3 layers of change. The outermost layer is outcomes, what you get. The middle layer is processes, what you do. And the deepest layer is identity, who you are. Almost everyone focuses on the outer 2. The rarest and most powerful approach starts from the inside. Here is what identity-based habit building actually looks like in practice. Instead of, I want to read more books, you tell yourself, I am a reader. Instead of, I want to exercise regularly, you tell yourself, I am someone who moves their body. Instead of, I want to be more disciplined, you tell yourself, I am a disciplined person. This sounds like positive affirmation. It is not. The crucial difference is what comes next. Every time you act in alignment with that identity, even in the smallest way, you cast a vote for that version of yourself. Read one page. Vote. Go for a 10-minute walk. Vote. Write one sentence. Vote. No single vote wins the election, but enough votes, cast consistently over time, build an unshakable case for who you are. The reason this works is rooted in how human beings actually make decisions. Most behavior is not driven by conscious choice. It is driven by self-image. People act in ways that are consistent with who they believe themselves to be, which means the fastest way to change your behavior permanently is not to try harder. It is to change the story you are telling yourself about who you are. The person who identifies as a runner does not negotiate with themselves about whether to go for a run today. The person who identifies as a writer does not wait for inspiration. The identity makes the decision before the moment of choice even arrives. Start small. Start with one behavior so simple it almost feels pointless. But before you do it, ask yourself, what kind of person would do this? Then become that person, one vote at a time. The goal is not to achieve something. The goal is to become someone. Achievement follows identity. It almost never works the other way around. Lesson 3. The habit loop. Every habit you have, good or bad, follows the exact same pattern. It does not matter whether it is checking your phone first thing in the morning, going for a run, eating when you are stressed, or brushing your teeth before bed. Same structure, every single time. Clear breaks it down into 4 stages: cue, craving, response, reward. And understanding this loop is not just interesting. It is the operating manual for every habit you will ever try to build or break. The cue is the trigger. Something in your environment signals to your brain that a reward is available. It could be a time of day, a location, an emotion, a person, even a smell. Your brain is constantly scanning for cues that have previously led to something good, and the moment it finds one, the process begins automatically. The craving follows immediately. This is the motivational force behind every habit. You do not crave the habit itself. You crave the feeling the habit produces. The smoker does not crave the cigarette. They crave the relief it brings. The person reaching for their phone does not crave the device. They crave the stimulation or the escape it delivers. Without a craving, there is no reason to act. The response is the habit itself, the action you take. But Clear makes an important point here. The response only happens if the craving is strong enough and the action is easy enough. Raise the difficulty too high and the habit breaks down at this stage, regardless of how much you want the reward. The reward is what the brain was after all along. It satisfies the craving and, crucially, it teaches the brain to remember this loop for next time. Every reward that lands reinforces the connection between the cue and the behavior, which is why habits, once formed, become almost automatic. The brain has learned that this cue reliably leads to this reward, and it stops requiring conscious decision-making to get there. Here is why this matters practically. You cannot remove a habit, you can only replace it. Because the cue and the craving do not disappear just because you decide to stop the behavior. The loop is still running, the trigger still fires, the craving still rises. What you can do is interrupt the response. Replace the action with something that delivers a similar reward through a different path. The person who eats when stressed does not need to stop feeling stressed. They need a different response to that feeling that still provides some form of relief. Understanding the loop tells you exactly where to intervene, and that precision is what separates people who successfully change their habits from people who just repeatedly try and fail. Lesson 4. Make good habits obvious. There is a hospital in Amsterdam that made one small change to their cafeteria. They moved the water dispensers from the corners of the room to positions next to every food station. They did not remove the soft drinks. They did not put up posters about healthy hydration. They did not run a single awareness campaign. Water consumption increased by 300% within months. Nobody was told to drink more water. The environment simply made water the most obvious choice, and obvious, Clear argues, almost always wins. This is the first of Clear's 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, and it is built on one foundational insight. Most habits are not triggered by conscious decisions. They are triggered by cues in the environment, which means if you want a behavior to happen consistently, your first job is to make the cue impossible to miss. Most people try to build habits through motivation. They rely on remembering to do the thing, wanting to do the thing, feeling ready to do the thing. Clear says this is the hardest possible approach because motivation fluctuates. Memory is unreliable. Feelings change by the hour. Environment does not fluctuate, it just sits there shaping behavior quietly and constantly. Clear introduces 2 practical tools for making habits obvious. The first is implementation intention. Most habits fail not because people lack desire, but because they lack specificity. I will exercise more is not a plan, it is a wish. I will go for a 30-minute walk at 7 every morning before I open my phone is a plan. The research behind implementation intentions is striking. People who specify exactly when and where they will perform a habit are significantly more likely to follow through than people who simply intend to do it. The second tool is habit stacking. You take an existing habit, something you already do automatically, and attach the new behavior directly to it. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write for 10 minutes. After I sit down at my desk, I will review my priorities for the day. After I brush my teeth at night, I will read for 15 minutes. The existing habit becomes the cue for the new one. You are not creating a new trigger from scratch. You are borrowing one that already fires reliably every day. There is a third principle. Clear emphasizes that most people underestimate. Design your environment so the cues for good habits are visible and the cues for bad ones are hidden. Want to read more? Put the book on your pillow. Want to practice guitar? Leave it on the stand in the middle of the room. Want to eat healthier? Put the fruit on the counter and move everything else out of sight. Want to use your phone less? Put it in another room. You do not need more willpower. You need fewer obstacles between you and the right behavior, and more obstacles between you and the wrong one. Obvious is not a small advantage. In a world of competing habits and limited attention, obvious is almost everything. Lesson 5. The power of environment. In the 1960s, the United States military discovered something deeply uncomfortable about their soldiers returning from Vietnam. Nearly 40% of them had used heroin during the war. Back home, the government braced for a public health catastrophe. They expected mass addiction. They launched treatment programs. They prepared for the worst. It never came. Around 90% of the soldiers who had used heroin in Vietnam simply stopped when they returned home. No rehab, no 12-step programs, no years of struggling against cravings. They just stopped. The researchers were baffled until they looked at the one thing that had changed: the environment. In Vietnam, heroin was everywhere. The cues were constant. The stress, the people, the locations, the rituals surrounding it. Every environmental signal pointed toward the habit. Back home, those cues simply did not exist. New environment, new behavior, almost automatically. This is the insight Clear builds this entire lesson around. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your environment. And that means designing your environment is not a productivity trick. It is the most important habit decision you will ever make. Most people try to change their behavior while keeping their environment exactly the same. They want to eat less, but keep the kitchen stocked identically. They want to focus more, but keep their phone on the desk. They want to read more, but keep the television in the bedroom. And then they blame themselves when it doesn't work. Clear's argument is that this is not a character failure. It is an environmental one. The cues around you are constantly pulling your behavior in a direction, and if you have not deliberately designed that direction, the environment is designing it for you, usually toward whatever is most convenient, most stimulating, and most immediately rewarding. The practical application is straightforward. Audit the spaces where your habits happen. Your bedroom shapes your sleep habits. Your kitchen shapes your eating habits. Your desk shapes your work habits. Your phone's home screen shapes your attention habits. None of these are neutral. Every one of them is either working for you or against you. Clear recommends one specific strategy. Create obvious spaces for your habits. Give each behavior its own location. Meditate in one specific chair. Work at one specific desk. Read in one specific spot. Over time, your brain begins to associate those locations with those behaviors. Walking into the space becomes the cue. The habit follows almost without effort. And when a habit is deeply stuck, when the environment is so loaded with old cues that changing behavior feels impossible, Clear offers one radical but effective solution. Change the environment completely. Move to a new space. Rearrange the room. Take a different route. Start fresh somewhere. The old associations do not exist yet. It sounds dramatic, but the soldiers from Vietnam did not need therapy to quit heroin. They needed a plane ticket home. Your environment is not a backdrop to your habits. It is the author of them. Start treating it that way. Lesson 6. Make habits attractive. A neuroscientist named James Olds accidentally discovered something that changed how we understand human motivation forever. He was implanting electrodes in rat brains to study pain responses. One electrode landed in the wrong region, the brain's dopamine center. When the rat moved in a way that activated it, something happened, and the rat immediately tried to make it happen again. Olds gave the rats a lever that triggered the electrode. They pressed it up to 700 times per hour. They ignored food, they ignored water, they ignored everything else. They were not experiencing pleasure. They were experiencing anticipation of pleasure. And anticipation, it turns out, is more powerful than the reward itself. This is the foundation of Clear's second law. Make it attractive, and it is rooted in one uncomfortable truth about how human motivation actually works. Dopamine does not spike when you receive a reward. It spikes when you anticipate one. The excitement before the holiday is more intense than the holiday itself. The craving before the meal is more powerful than the satisfaction after it. Which means, if you want to build a habit, your real job is not to make the activity enjoyable. It is to make the anticipation of it irresistible. Clear's primary tool for this is temptation bundling. The concept is simple. Pair something you need to do with something you genuinely want to do. Only listen to your favorite podcast while exercising. Only watch the show you are hooked on while folding laundry. Only go to the coffee shop you love when you are working on the project you have been avoiding. The activity you enjoy becomes the reward your brain is anticipating. And because your brain now associates the habit with that anticipation, showing up becomes significantly easier. You are not forcing yourself through something unpleasant. You are accessing something desirable, and the habit comes along with it. But Clear goes deeper than technique here. He makes an observation that most habit books completely miss. The attractiveness of any behavior is heavily shaped by the people around you. Humans are social creatures wired to adopt the habits of their tribe. For most of human history, fitting in with the group was a matter of survival. That wiring has not changed, which means the single most powerful thing you can do to make a good habit attractive is to spend time around people for whom that habit is already normal. If everyone in your environment reads, reading becomes attractive. If everyone in your environment exercises, exercise becomes the default. You do not have to fight your social instincts. You can use them. The culture you surround yourself with does not just influence your habits. Over time, it becomes them. Lesson 7. Join the right tribe. Imagine you move to a new city. You know nobody. Within a few months, you have made a group of friends who wake up early, read regularly, and exercise most days. Not because they are disciplined, just because that is what they do. Without trying, without planning, without a single resolution, you start doing the same things. Now imagine the opposite. Same city, different group, late nights, fast food, endless scrolling. Same result, different direction. You did not change your values. You changed your environment, and your environment changed you. Clear argues that this is not weakness, it is biology. Human beings are wired to imitate the people around them. For most of human history, belonging to a group was the difference between survival and death. The brain learned, at a very deep level, that what the group does is probably worth doing. That instinct has not disappeared. It just expresses itself differently now. Instead of following the tribe to find food, you follow the tribe to find what is normal, what is acceptable, what is worth doing with your time. And normal is extraordinarily powerful. You do not have to convince yourself to do something that everyone around you already does without thinking. Clear identifies 3 groups whose habits we tend to absorb most automatically. The first is the close group. Your friends, family, and the people you spend the most time with daily. Their habits become your habits almost through osmosis, not through pressure, just through proximity and repetition. The second is the many, the broader culture around you. Whatever the majority of people in your environment treat as normal becomes the path of least resistance for you too. This is why habits that feel impossible in one culture feel completely natural in another. The third is the powerful, the people you admire and look up to. You imitate them not because they tell you to, but because their habits are attached to an identity you find attractive. You want to become like them. And so you start doing what they do. The practical implication is simple but significant. If you are trying to build a habit that feels difficult, find a group where that habit is the default. Want to read more? Join a book club. Want to train consistently? Find people who treat missing a session as unusual rather than normal. Want to build a business? Spend time around people who are already doing it. You are not looking for accountability partners. You are looking for a new normal. Because when the behavior you want to build is simply what the people around you do, the struggle largely disappears. Identity is social, and the fastest way to become a different person is to spend time around people who are already that person. Lesson 8. Make habits easy. Victor Hugo had a deadline problem. His publisher had been waiting over a year for his next novel. Hugo kept getting distracted. Dinner parties, social visits, other projects. Everything felt more urgent than sitting down to write. Finally, his publisher gave him an ultimatum. Deliver the manuscript within 6 months or forfeit the contract entirely. Hugo's solution was unusual. He collected all of his elegant clothes and locked them away. He kept only a large shawl. With nothing appropriate to wear in public, he could not leave the house. He had no choice but to sit down and write. The Hunchback of Notre Dame was delivered 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Hugo did not become more disciplined. He did not find more motivation. He simply made the wrong behavior impossible and the right behavior the only available option. This is Clear's third law: make it easy. And the insight underneath it is one of the most practically useful ideas in the entire book. We tend to believe that the habits we keep are the ones we care about most, but research consistently shows something different. The habits we keep are the ones that require the least amount of effort. Friction, the resistance between intention and action, is the invisible force deciding which behaviors survive and which ones quietly disappear. Clear introduces what he calls the law of least effort. Every living system naturally gravitates toward the option that requires the least energy. Human beings are no different. Given 2 paths to the same destination, the brain will almost always choose the easier one, which means designing habits is really about designing friction. Reduce the friction on behaviors you want. Increase the friction on behaviors you don't. Want to exercise in the morning? Sleep in your workout clothes. Put your shoes by the door the night before. Make the first step so effortless that there is no decision to make at 6 in the morning, just momentum that was already set in motion the night before. Want to eat less junk food? Don't buy it. Make the path from craving to consumption require a trip to the store. That distance, that added friction, is enough to break the loop for most people most of the time. Clear also introduces the concept of decisive moments. Most habits are not decided in the moment of action. They are decided earlier, at a small fork in the road that determines which direction the next hour goes. The moment you sit on the couch when you get home from work is a decisive moment. It makes the gym significantly less likely. The moment you open a delivery app because you haven't planned dinner is a decisive moment. It makes cooking significantly less likely. Identify the decisive moments in your day and design them deliberately, because the choice that feels small in the moment is often the one that decides everything that follows. Motivation gets the credit. Friction does the actual work. Make the right thing easy enough and you will not need to rely on motivation at all. Lesson 9. The 2-minute rule. Jeff had been telling himself he would start meditating for 3 years. He had bought the app. He had read the articles. He had bookmarked the beginner guides. Every Sunday night he told himself, "This week is the week." Monday morning arrived. He opened his phone instead. The problem was not that meditation was hard. 10 minutes of sitting quietly is not hard. The problem was that 10 minutes felt like a commitment, and commitment, first thing in the morning, felt like too much to decide. So he never started. Clear's solution to this problem is almost embarrassingly simple. If a habit takes more than 2 minutes to begin, you are starting too big. Not 2 minutes to complete, 2 minutes to start. The entire strategy is built around one insight. The most important moment of any habit is the moment you begin. Because beginning creates momentum, and momentum, once it exists, is far easier to sustain than it is to generate from nothing. So you shrink the habit until starting, it requires almost no decision at all. Meditate for 10 minutes becomes sit in the chair and close your eyes for 2 minutes. Read before bed becomes open the book. Exercise every morning becomes put on your workout clothes and step outside. That is it. That is the whole habit, at least at the start. This sounds too small to matter. That is exactly the point. Clear is not saying 2 minutes is the goal. He is saying 2 minutes is the gateway. Once you are sitting in the chair with your eyes closed, continuing for 10 minutes costs almost nothing. Once you have opened the book, reading a chapter requires no additional decision. Once you are outside in your workout clothes, the run has already half started. The 2-minute version of the habit is not a lesser version. It is the version that actually gets done, and that eventually, through repetition, expands naturally into the full behavior. There is a deeper principle underneath this rule that Clear is careful to name. Standardize before you optimize. Most people try to optimize a habit before they have standardized it. They want the perfect morning routine before they have proven they can show up for a basic one. They want the most effective workout before they have established the habit of simply going. And the perfectionism kills the habit before it ever takes root. The goal in the beginning is not to do the habit well. The goal is to do the habit consistently, to prove to yourself, through repeated action, that you are the kind of person who shows up. Quality comes later. Identity comes first. Jeff eventually started meditating, not with 10 minutes, with 2. He sat in his chair every morning and did nothing except breathe for 120 seconds. 3 weeks later, he was meditating for 15 minutes without trying. The 2 minutes had done their job. They had gotten him to show up, and showing up, it turns out, was the only thing that was ever actually in the way. Lesson 10. Master repetition, not perfection. At the University of Florida, a photography teacher ran an unusual experiment with his students. He divided the class into 2 groups. The first group would be graded purely on quantity. Take 200 photos by the end of term and you get an A. The second group would be graded on quality. Take 1 perfect photo and you get an A. At the end of the term, something unexpected happened. Every single one of the best photographs came from the quantity group, while the quality group had spent the entire semester theorizing about the perfect shot, reading about lighting, debating composition, waiting for the right moment. The quantity group had been shooting constantly, failing constantly, adjusting constantly, and through sheer repetition, they had accidentally become excellent. Clear uses this story to make one of the most important points in the entire book. We do not learn habits by thinking about them. We learn them by doing them, repeatedly, imperfectly, without waiting until we feel ready. He introduces the concept of automaticity, the point at which a behavior no longer requires conscious effort. You do not think about how to brush your teeth. You do not motivate yourself to tie your shoelaces. The action has been repeated enough times that it runs on its own, beneath conscious decision-making. That is the goal with every habit you are trying to build. Not to do it perfectly, to do it enough times that it becomes automatic. Most people treat a missed day as a failure. They break the streak once and suddenly the habit feels fragile, or worse, already lost. Clear's response to this is direct. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the beginning of a new habit. The single most important rule of habit maintenance is never miss twice. 1 missed day changes nothing. The habit is still intact. The identity is still intact. What destroys habits is not the missed day. It is the spiral that follows it. The all-or-nothing thinking that says if I cannot do it perfectly, I should not do it at all. Showing up badly is almost always better than not showing up. A 2-minute workout on a day when you have no energy is not a compromise, it is a vote. It is proof to your brain that you are still the person who does this, even when it is hard, even when it is inconvenient, even when the version you manage today looks nothing like the version you imagined. Perfection is the enemy of repetition, and repetition is the only thing that actually builds habits. The photographer who took 200 imperfect photos did not set out to become excellent. They set out to show up. Excellence arrived on its own. Lesson 11. Make habits satisfying. Picture this. You have just finished a workout you did not feel like doing. You were tired, you almost skipped it, but you showed up anyway. Now imagine two versions of what happens next. In the first version, you go home, shower, and move on with your day. Nothing marks the moment. It just disappears into the rest of the afternoon. In the second version, you pull out a small calendar and draw a single X over today's date. 1 mark, 10 seconds. That is all. Same workout, same effort, completely different likelihood of showing up tomorrow. This is Clear's fourth and final law. Make it satisfying, and it is built on one of the most well-established findings in behavioral psychology. Behaviors that feel good at the end get repeated. Behaviors that don't quietly disappear. The problem with most good habits is that the reward is delayed. You exercise today, but the health benefit arrives months from now. You save money today, but financial security is years away. You study today, but the knowledge compounds over a lifetime. The brain, which evolved to prioritize immediate feedback, struggles to stay motivated by rewards it cannot feel yet. Clear's solution is to add immediate satisfaction to habits whose natural rewards are distant. This is where tracking becomes a tool rather than a chore. A habit tracker, whether a physical calendar, a simple app, or a notebook, does something specific. It makes the invisible visible. Progress that was accumulating beneath the surface suddenly has a form. A chain of X marks that grows longer every day. A streak that starts to feel worth protecting. And the act of marking it, that small immediate moment of completion, delivers a tiny reward right now. The brain registers it. The behavior gets reinforced. Tomorrow becomes slightly easier than today. Clear introduces one additional idea here that cuts against conventional wisdom. Never break the chain. But if you do, never miss twice. A single missed mark on the calendar is not a crisis. What turns a missed day into a broken habit is the response to missing. People who recover immediately, who show up the next day without drama or self-criticism, maintain their habits through imperfect stretches. People who treat one missed day as evidence that they have failed tend to spiral. The chain is not the point. The identity behind the chain is the point. And identity survives a missed day far more easily than most people believe. Satisfaction does not have to be dramatic. It does not have to be a reward system or a point scheme or a complex tracking app. It just has to be something, anything, that gives the brain a signal in the moment that this behavior was worth doing. That signal, repeated enough times, becomes the habit itself. Lesson 12. Track your progress. Benjamin Franklin carried a small notebook everywhere he went. In it, he tracked 13 personal virtues he was trying to develop: temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, humility. Every evening he sat down and marked whether he had lived up to each one that day. He did this for years, not because anyone asked him to, not because he was being evaluated, because he understood something that most people discover too late. What gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed actually changes. Clear dedicates this lesson to habit tracking because it does something no amount of motivation or intention can replicate. It creates an honest record of who you actually are versus who you think you are. Most people operate on self-perception. They believe they eat reasonably well, exercise fairly regularly, spend their time productively. And then they track it for 1 week and discover the gap between belief and reality is significant, not because they were lying to themselves deliberately, but because memory is unreliable and self-image is optimistic by default. Tracking removes the blur. It replaces vague impressions with specific data, and specific data is the only foundation on which real change can be built. But Clear is careful about how he frames tracking, because tracking done wrong becomes its own trap. Goodhart's law states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. The student who tracks study hours starts sitting at the desk without actually studying. The person who tracks gym visits starts showing up without actually training. The number looks right. The habit has hollowed out. Tracking should serve the habit. The moment you start serving the tracking, something has gone wrong. Clear's recommendation is simple. Track the behavior that actually matters, not the proxy for it. Track whether you wrote, not how many words. Track whether you trained, not how many calories you burned. Keep the measurement honest and the measurement stays useful. There is one more dimension to tracking that Clear highlights. Seeing your progress visually, a chain of completed days, a graph moving in the right direction, a notebook filling up, does something to the brain that pure intention cannot. It makes the invisible visible. Habits compound silently. Progress accumulates beneath the surface for weeks before it becomes noticeable. Tracking gives that invisible progress a form, something you can point to, something that confirms the work is real, even when the results are not yet. Franklin never became perfect at his 13 virtues. He said so himself. But he became significantly better than he would have been without the notebook. The notebook was not the habit. It was the mirror that kept the habit honest. Lesson 13. Break bad habits. Nobody decides to develop a bad habit. You do not wake up one morning and think, I am going to start mindlessly scrolling for 2 hours every night. You do not choose to become someone who eats when stressed, or procrastinates on everything that matters, or reaches for the phone every time silence becomes uncomfortable. It happens gradually. Then, it is just who you are. And undoing it, Clear argues, requires understanding exactly how it got there in the first place. Bad habits follow the exact same loop as good ones. Cue, craving, response, reward. The difference is not in the structure, it is in the direction. A bad habit is simply a behavior that delivers immediate reward at the cost of delayed consequences. The junk food tastes good now. The health damage arrives later. The scroll feels good now. The lost hour arrives later. The brain does not weigh future consequences heavily. It responds to what is immediate, which is why willpower alone almost never works against a deeply established bad habit. You are fighting the entire reward system of your brain with nothing but intention. Clear's approach is not about fighting the habit. It is about redesigning the conditions that make it inevitable. The first tool is inversion of the 4 laws. Everything that makes good habits work, reversed, dismantles bad ones. Make it invisible. Remove the cue from your environment entirely. If you eat junk food when it is in the house, stop buying it. The craving cannot fire reliably without a trigger. Out of sight genuinely is out of mind. Not because you forget the habit exists, but because the automatic loop never gets started. Make it unattractive. Reframe the habit by focusing on what it costs rather than what it delivers. The cigarette does not relax you. It creates the anxiety it temporarily relieves. The scroll does not rest your mind. It exhausts it through constant stimulation. When the brain starts associating a behavior with its true cost rather than its surface reward, the craving weakens. Make it difficult. Add friction between the cue and the response. Log out of social media apps so opening them requires an extra step. Put your phone in another room. Use a website blocker during work hours. You are not relying on willpower in the moment. You are making the moment of weakness harder to act on. Make it unsatisfying. This is the most underused tool. Find a way to attach an immediate cost to the behavior. Tell a friend you will donate money to a cause you dislike every time you miss a workout. Use a habit tracker where breaking the chain is visually obvious. Make the consequence of the bad habit felt now, rather than later. Clear makes one point that cuts through most conventional advice about bad habits. You cannot eliminate a bad habit. You can only replace it. The cue still fires. The craving still rises. The loop is still running. What you can change is the response. What you do when the craving appears. Find a behavior that delivers a similar reward through a different path. The person who stress eats needs something that also provides comfort in that moment. The person who scrolls needs something that also provides stimulation or escape. Same craving, different response. That is the only reliable architecture for lasting change. Lesson 14. Avoid plateaus, stay consistent. In 1955, a young chess prodigy named Laszlo Polgar made a decision that the world thought was absurd. He had not yet had children, but he had a theory. He believed that genius was not born, it was built. That any child raised in the right environment with the right system of deliberate practice could become world-class at almost anything. So he decided to raise chess champions. He married a woman who shared his conviction. Together they homeschooled their 3 daughters, immersing them in chess from the age of 4. The world watched with skepticism. All 3 daughters became chess grandmasters. The youngest, Judith Polgar, became the strongest female chess player in history, defeating multiple world champions at her peak. Laszlo was not lucky. He understood something that most people discover too late. Consistency over time, applied to the right system, produces results that look like genius from the outside. But here is what the story does not show. The years in the middle, the thousands of practice sessions that felt identical to the ones before them, the periods where improvement was invisible, the days where the girls almost certainly did not want to sit at the board again. Clear calls this the valley of disappointment, and it is where most habits go to die. The pattern is predictable. You start a new habit with energy and intention. The first few weeks show real progress, then the progress slows. The results plateau. The behavior that was once new and engaging becomes routine and unremarkable, and without the dopamine hit of visible improvement, the habit starts to feel pointless. This is the moment most people quit, not because the habit stopped working, but because it stopped feeling like it was working. Clear is direct about this. Boredom is the greatest threat to long-term consistency, not failure, not difficulty. Boredom, the feeling that you have done this before and nothing particularly interesting is happening. His solution is not to make habits more exciting. It is to make peace with the fact that mastery requires doing unremarkable things repeatedly for longer than feels comfortable. He introduces the concept of the Goldilocks rule. Habits stay engaging when they sit at the edge of your current ability. Too easy and they become boring. Too hard and they become discouraging. The sweet spot, just slightly beyond what is comfortable, keeps the brain engaged without overwhelming it, which means progression is not optional. It is what keeps consistency alive. Every few weeks, find a way to make the habit slightly more challenging. Add 1 more page, add 5 more minutes, add a little more weight, not dramatically, just enough to keep the edge. The Polgar daughters did not stay at the same level of chess for 20 years. They progressed constantly, systematically, incrementally. The system was designed so that each stage was just difficult enough to require focus. Without being so difficult, it caused them to shut down. That balance, challenge without overwhelm, is what turned daily practice into world-class performance. Consistency without progression becomes stagnation. Progression without consistency produces nothing. The two together, sustained through the valley where results are invisible and boredom is loudest, is where every lasting result is actually built. Lesson 15. The secret to lasting success. There is a line from this book that stops most people when they first read it. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Read it once and it sounds like a motivational quote. Read it again and it dismantles something most of us have believed our entire lives, that the key to achievement is wanting something badly enough. Clear's final argument is the one the entire book has been building toward. Goals are not the problem. Every successful person has goals. Every unsuccessful person has goals too. The goal does not separate them. The system does. Think about 2 people who both want to run a marathon. The first person announces the goal, downloads a training plan and starts with enormous enthusiasm. When life gets in the way, a busy week, a missed run, a minor injury, the motivation that was carrying them evaporates. Without the feeling driving them forward, the training stops. The second person does not focus on the marathon. They focus on becoming a runner. They build a morning routine around it. They join a running group. They track their weekly mileage. They design their environment so that running is the path of least resistance. The marathon is just the natural endpoint of a system that was already running itself. Same goal, completely different outcome. Clear makes one final distinction that brings everything in this book together. There are 2 types of growth: outcome-based and identity-based. Outcome-based growth is focused on what you achieve. Identity-based growth is focused on who you become. And the deepest secret of lasting success is that identity-based growth produces outcomes as a byproduct, while outcome-based growth almost never produces lasting identity change. The person who loses 20 pounds through sheer willpower and discipline often gains it back because nothing about their identity changed. They were still the same person who found comfort in food, who did not think of themselves as someone who exercised, who never built the systems that make healthy behavior automatic. The person who builds the identity of someone who takes care of their body, who votes for that identity daily through small consistent actions, does not need to diet. The behavior follows the identity without effort. This is what James Clear spent the entire book trying to show you, not a collection of productivity tricks, not a better goal-setting framework. A completely different relationship with change itself. Change is not an event. It is a direction. It is the accumulation of tiny decisions made consistently over a longer period of time than feels necessary, until one day the person you are trying to become is simply the person you are. Every habit you build is a vote. Every vote shapes an identity. Every identity produces a life. You already know what kind of life you want. The only question that remains is what kind of person you are willing to become to get there. Start small. Start now. Start with 2 minutes if that is all you have. The rest will follow.
So yeah, this is the end of this video, and here I want to add one more thing. If you are just reading the key lessons of this book and not applying it in your real life, so it won't help you that much. So you should apply the key lessons in your real life scenarios. So yeah, that's it for today's video. If you like it, then like this video and subscribe my channel Audiobook Insider for more such informative content.